yesterday in our session, we actually had both representation from the police, who said it's really, really important to directly liaise with your local police force and put the precautions in. But we also had the imam from Southport Mosque, and he said they literally had to hide in an office because they were afraid far-right thugs would break their door down. So fear is palpable, but our message is to remain calm, to remain united, and to work with the local community to ensure that this kind of hatred doesn't have a place in our society.
Zara, welcome to the show. Thanks very much for joining us. Now, we've obviously seen a lot of disturbances over this last week following this incident at Southport. A lot of mosques seem to be targeted, and we have heard plans of more protests coming up over the following days. And again, mosques may be attracting a lot of these protesters. How is the Muslim community feeling about this, and what steps are you taking in light of this news?
So Muslim communities are really quite anxious at this time and deeply distressed. Yesterday, we hosted a community briefing session, and we had representation of mosques from all over the country, small, big and large, from Aberdeen to Luton and London and everywhere else. And there are significant concerns around mosque security. Today is Friday prayer, but particularly this weekend, there's been so much spread on social media by far-right groups that they're specifically going to be targeting mosques. I have had community members message me saying, what should we do? We're worried. Should we cancel prayers? Should we close the mosque? Yesterday in our session, we actually had both representation from the police, who said it's really, really important to directly liaise with your local police force and put the precautions in. But we also had the imam from Southport Mosque, and he said they literally had to hide in an office because they were afraid far-right thugs would break their door down. So fear is palpable, but our message is to remain calm, to remain united, and to work with the local community to ensure that this kind of hatred doesn't have a place in our society.
And will extra security measures be brought into mosques around the country from this weekend?
I believe so. So I think mosques themselves are going to be doing risk assessments, and police forces are aware up and down the country that many mosques are going to be a subject possibly to thugs coming, protesting, rioting. I think from what we've heard, extra surveillance, even manned security guards. So yeah, I think there will definitely be moves to increase. And also, I think maybe to just make it a little bit more human. You've got to remember we have many elderly members of the community that go to the mosque. We have many women, lots of children's classes and programs, especially on the weekend and it's summer. So there's a whole range of people that use these facilities, and it's not just the prayer. And so we're just really conscious to make sure that everybody's fully aware and prepared. But we really do hope that it doesn't really come down to that.
Now, one of the reasons why these protests have kicked off is there's been a lot of misinformation on the internet, and people seem to be linking what's happened in Southport somehow to Muslim people. Why do you think that has happened?
I mean, firstly, I should, also express my deepest condolences for the very precious lives that we lost, and, absolutely abhorrent attack. But unfortunately, this tragedy has been capitalized by really quite dark forces in the misinformation campaign that went across social media. And this isn't the first time, but as we found out, Russian bots, I believe, that were behind it. But it's not just that. It's, people like Nigel Farage, Tommy Robinson, and those seeking to demonize Muslim communities. We saw it with the Hare Hills riots in Leeds, where quickly it was around Muslims that were having these riots, which it wasn't. We saw the kind of discourse around Manchester Airport, and now here again. And what's really different about this time is the incitement was connected to a story about children being killed, so much so that it's now sparked awful, awful thuggery. And, more than 50 police officers hurt.
Yeah.
Southport, just
I
it's
mean,
really
it,
insane.
it does feel that there is, a lot of these people have jumped straight to blaming Muslims for this. I mean, on the point about the Manchester police, what was interesting about that was that one side of the video came out, which of course, to the naked eye, the police officer behaved very badly and they have been suspended. But when the other bit of the video came out as well, I mean, these two guys who were swinging away, I mean, they weren't to the naked eye. I mean, it wasn't like it was just a one-sided thing there.
Yeah, no, of course. And I think what I was maybe getting to is that we've got lots of very polarized narratives, which are feeding, no, we're the more patriotic community, and this community just wants to attack us. And what we're seeing is not great, to be honest, because in some ways you're vilifying a community, that community is then pushing back, and then we've just got narratives that don't really help the situation but inflame it, actually. And I think what we saw from that was precisely that polarization. And of course, anybody attacking the police is completely illegal, offensive, disturbing. We condemn it completely. But here we are at a point now where these same patriots are now attacking the police, throwing fire missiles at them. Downing Street, you saw the kind of, and Hartlepool
Yeah.
and Manchester. So it's this kind of, awful situation. But the police, and to their credit, have been doing their best to keep everybody safe.
I mean, the police have also faced a very difficult time from other communities as well. You mentioned the Hare Hill disturbance, but also, I mean, we have had situations where, and I have to say, it's largely men, whether it's men on the far right who are sympathetic to Tommy Robinson, but we also have had men from our own community. You and I are both from a Muslim community, for example, when we saw Shabana Mahmood and Jess Phillips being shouted down at their counts by pretty thuggish men as well. Would you condemn those men from our communities as much as you would condemn these men from the far right?
I think any kind of violence, intimidation, threat, abuse is completely unacceptable, and of course condemn all of it. I
And you would
think,
condemn the men who shouted down Shabana Mahmood and Jess Phillips?
of course, and I've actually called that out on my social media as well, because that doesn't represent anybody in our communities, nor does it represent how we should be engaging in the political process. If anything, it just feeds into far right narratives and tropes about Muslims. And I think it should be really clear that they don't represent Muslim communities. And I think Jess quite rightly said they're just thugs, and you're right to point out that there's a lot of males involved in this. And I think Jess has also talked about, gender-based violence and the kind of intimidation that women specifically get.
Mm.
And I think when you see the scenes, even in Southport, personally, I was just absolutely terrified, thinking, gosh, imagine all those the people on the streets, their homes, the communities. There's a lady talking about bricks being taken away from her wall and
Yeah.
was shouted at. So I think
And
all of it is just really quite abhorrent.
look, we have a new government. Keir Starmer met with police chiefs yesterday. He had a press conference. He said that he was going to take this very seriously. What do you think the government needs to do to give some reassurance to the Muslim community who are feeling very anxious this weekend?
I think it's really, really important now that there is a really strong stance against Islamophobia, that being in policy, that being protections in law, and I think that being a very vocal voice from the top. And we saw, particularly with the previous government, the likes of Lee Anderson and Suella talking about Islamists are taking over. I think that kind of rhetoric really needs to be challenged and turned around. I think we need the kind of working group on Islamophobia restored, the definition back on the table. And I think there needs to be a really strong voice right at the top. And I really commend the Prime Minister for what he did say, that we are going to be protecting Muslim communities. Muslims are not asking for favors. We're asking for the same parity of protection given to all communities and all faith groups as well. And I think that feeling is that, oh, it's Muslims, they don't really care. And our mosques could be attacked this weekend, but they're not our mosques as in my mosque. They belong, they're part of British society and British communities. And I think nobody wants that in their neighborhood. So we really do need a really strong approach. And I know the Prime Minister talked about law and order, but I think there's some really deep-seated narratives and figures like Nigel Farage that need to be taken to task. There's a
Okay.
parliamentarian inciting hatred through misinformation, and that should be called out as well.
I mean, he would, if he was on the show, he'd probably push back against that and say that he is not inciting hatred. But certainly there has been a lot of criticism over what he said. Well, look, Zara Mohammed, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us this afternoon.
Thank you so much.